Get more men knitting.
I will.
Okay.
Look at me, doing it anyway. Look at me, having some fun today.
Man versus knitting.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Man vs. Knitting. This is a channel to promote men in the industry of fiber arts, whether that is owning a yarn shop, running a yarn company, being an average knitter, being a new knitter. Whatever the person does, as long as it has to do with fiber and or knitting, I want to showcase them here. This section is called His Story or His Story, and that is to tell this person's story to you, to try to motivate you, inspire you, so that you can be a better knitter or perhaps want to get into this wonderful world of knitting and fiber. I want you to subscribe so you can be notified of when new episodes come out. I'm going to be a little bit more regular than usual, so be looking for that and hit the bell to be notified of when I do put out a new episode. A couple of weeks ago, I interviewed my friend Steven Sachnik with the Quilted Skein. That's a town in LaGrange, Texas. I went there for the best little yarn crawl in Texas, previously known as the Hill Country Yarn Crawl. So most of us still call it the Hill Country Yarn Crawl because it takes place in the hill country of Texas. The Quilted Skein in LaGrange, Texas was my first stop. And of course I wanted to see it because Steven has been a dear friend of mine for many years, and I wanted to bring some of his personality and perspective to you. So without further ado, let's get to the interview of Steven Sachnik with the Quilted Skein. So this is our next episode of the history interviews, and I want to introduce you to my friend Steven Sachnik.
Hello.
Hello. Steven and I have known each other for a very long time.
You don't need to say how long, just a long time.
And what we did was, he was part of that original men's knitting group here in Houston, like I told you about when you met Eric last time, or time before last, sorry. And so, but he was kind of starting, you were starting off knitting then.
Baby knitter.
Yeah, you were a baby knitter then. And then he forayed into, what would you call that?
Well, my spouse refers to them as my phases, and I was entering a tailoring phase at that point.
Yes, and he made a suit, an exquisite suit.
By hand.
By hand. It was amazing. And so he would come into the knit group, you know, like just, oh God, this lapel is killing me.
Ask me if I'll make another one. Oh, that was fun.
Funny.
It was fun.
Yeah. Those were fun times. And he's officially a member of the new Fibermen men's group here in Houston, like I told you about. But he hasn't had a chance to make it to one yet.
Hope to soon.
Yes.
But I have a good excuse.
You do have a good excuse.
I own the Quilted Skein, which is a yarn and fabric store in LaGrange, Texas.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great shop. Actually, if you follow on the Facebook page or Instagram, you've already seen how I kind of went to his shop on the last yarn crawl, which we'll talk about more in the Man vs. Knitting My Story section. But yeah, and so he's got a great shop, very beautiful, very friendly staff. I have to commend you on your staff choices.
Amen.
Yeah, because they really not only will help you as soon as you come in the door, but they don't badger you. They're friendly. They're like your sister or your cousin. Like they're that kind of friendly.
Well, it's the current environment in our business is a challenge because of the internet, and so everybody's got yarn, they've all got fabric, but what we've got is service. And why be mean to somebody? You know, people come in like I was when I first came to the knitting group. I didn't know. All I remember was Charles saying, "Oh my God, I dropped a yarn over," and everybody was like gasping, and I'm wondering, well, what's that? What's the yarn over? So he was very, very helpful and inspirational to getting me on the road I am today, which for better or for worse, here we are.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because I mean, when he was just starting the shop, I was a big supporter of it, and I still have been. Although we hadn't seen each other for a little while, so because you've been so busy. But his load is getting lighter because he's just now recently retired as a CFO for the Museum of Natural Science here in Houston.
Natural progression, CFO, knit shop owner. Another phase.
No, but this is a very good phase.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's one that's made you happy too.
Very.
Yeah, so because you smile a lot more than you did back then.
Well, because I didn't know what a yarn over was.
But now you do.
And I drop them too on a regular basis.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's what, like I said, the more you can learn about mistakes, how to fix them, the faster you learn that, the more confident and more content you'll be as a knitter. Because you don't freak out when you get to the mistake. And if you fixed like 7 or 8 mistakes already, and you get to the 9th or 10th mistake, you're like, I've already fixed those. You have the confidence to be able to fix the next thing that comes along.
This is something that just recently came up in my store, and not to be sexist, but I think the male mind is rigged to figure out how things work. And so I've been told it's easier for men to figure out a mistake than women. We're currently running a poll, but in doing that, I have found, and it's challenging. I mean, when you make a mistake and you've knitted for days and you look down and see something that's wrong, for me, I try to think in reverse of how I got there. You know, what was it that I was supposed to have done? And then I just start backing up, and magically it'll pop out like, oh, those are 2 stitches together that shouldn't be together. So what Charles has said, just slowly it becomes natural just to back up and say, oh, I see what I did. It doesn't come instantly, but the reward of fixing a made mistake is great.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I have no problem frogging or tinking, tink knit backwards.
See, I didn't know that either. They kept talking about tinking, and I'm like, what is this tink thing? And finally it dawned on me.
It's not Tinkerbell, it's tinking. But you know, once you've learned how to do that, there's a confidence level that'll just build. So if you don't know how to, or you're not adept at it, get adept at going backwards, because it really can save you. So tell me about the quilted skein. How has that been going for you? How many years is it?
We're going on 8 years now.
8 years.
And well, the first thing I did that everyone told me not to do was to have both fabric and yarn, because I needed to concentrate, and since nobody had done it, it was the wrong thing to do. Well, in our little town, there was no fabric shop, there was no yarn shop, and I had the space, so why not try it? So I did it.
When your placement in the town is also
It's
key for
true.
that.
The largest convention that comes to Houston is the International Quilt Festival.
Yep.
Not the most money, but the largest attended. And the woman that owns it opened the Texas Quilt Museum, which happens to be directly next door to me. Well, when
It's
the building...
It's like 3 doors down.
No, it's right next door.
Oh, is it really? Oh, they went all the way?
Yeah, it's all the way.
Oh my gosh.
So when the building became available, I thought, how hard can it be? I learned the answer to that question, by the way. But no, it's been very, very successful. I've met great people. It's not without its challenges, but what isn't these days?
Right. No, exactly.
And I'll start with probably the greatest reward came early on when we did our very first class, Learner's Permit to Knit. And it sold out, 8 people. That's all I was going to take, because I'd never taught a class before. The youngest, it was 8 women, and the youngest one was 68, and the oldest one was 85.
Wow.
And they had all wanted to learn how to knit, but you know, their lives got in the way, jobs, whatever. And 2 of them told me that they had gone to a previous knitting class in different stores, and the teacher told them they should try to learn something else because they would never learn how to knit.
What?
Exactly. And I said, first of all, who would say that? I'm going to have you learning to knit before you leave tonight. And she did, both of them. And we were there together for 6 weeks, had the best time, and
That's
all
so fun.
8 of these ladies are now knitting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I just loved it.
And see, and that's the kind of stories, if we can get more of the world knitting, we'd be a much happier place.
Well, I've got another one that made me feel really good. LaGrange is a lot of ranches, a lot of farming around, and one day we don't get a lot of men in the store, and one day this big,
What we're doing here.
tall cowboy came in with his hat on and his young son, and
Okay.
he said, and they both had spurs on their boots, so these were real real ones, and they weren't nice and shiny, they were muddy and beat up. And I said, yes sir, can I help you? And he said, I need some yarn for my son. And
What?
it came out that the grandmother of the kid had taught him how to knit, and he made his mother a scarf, and she wore it to a baseball game, and her friends saw it and said, oh, what a lovely scarf. She said, well, my son made it. Really? Do you think he can make me one? And so the little boy started knitting
Wow.
for the mothers for money to pay for his baseball camp. And pretty soon all these other little kids saw this pile of money that Junior had coming in, and not all, I don't know how many, but a lot of his friends were knitting now for money so they could go to baseball camp. And I said, that's got to be the best story.
That is the best story.
Just made me so happy.
I don't care what your motivation is. Just
Well, and he
Just do
said
it.
he liked it, so
Yeah.
that's even more important. And,
well, that's part of the hurdle. Try it. You might like it.
because my very best friend, when I opened the shop, she's a big golfer, to support me, she said, I'll learn how to knit. Well, she's worse than I am as far as OCD. She can't sit down. And I knew from the beginning that this was going to be tough on both of us. And we went through so many balls of yarn, and she was at a girls' night, and one of her friends tells the story that she let out this string of expletives, and the ball of yarn went flying across the room into the fireplace, which was going. And she said, I don't care if he likes me or not. I'm not doing this. So Charles Point, you have to like this. That's the one requirement. Anybody can learn how to knit, crochet, sew, whatever, if you want to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason can be whether you just need a hobby, whether you want to do something with your hands, whether you want to increase your cognitive function by focusing on something. And there's studies to support that knitting improves all these things. But more importantly, what if you just want to create a product? What if you have somebody that you want to knit for? You have a new baby in your life. You have a new neighbor that you really like. It's boss's day and you want to give them something heartfelt. There are a lot of reasons why you might want to knit. And if you want to give a knitted item, one of the only ways you can get there, apart from buying it, more importantly, is making it.
Well, and we just got through with our 2019 yarn crawl, and I was amazed.
And I can't believe you still have hair.
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother story. I was amazed at the number of young people that were coming in.
Really?
I mean, teenagers, 18,
Wow.
17, and we don't see that on the quilting side, unfortunately. But unscientifically, I think that kids today, well, maybe even 2 generations now, are so used to punching a button to get something that they don't realize somebody touched this. Whether it was a machine or whatever, but somebody made that happen. And when they realize they can create something with their hands and get enjoyment out of it, it's like a light bulb goes off. Some like it, some don't. But the self-actualization of making something, giving it to somebody, or wearing it yourself, and having somebody say, wow, that's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, it really is. And that's why local yarn shops are very important. Not just because he has one, but I was really glad when he got one, because Houston, as I've told you before, we don't have a lot of yarn shops. And if we do, they're on outlying cities, not outlying suburbs of Houston, outlying cities of Houston. And while I'd love for that to change, that's why I kind of did the whole Facebook thing and reviewed every one of the shops, because I want people to go into the shops. I want people to go into your shop, because if you're still there, you're still giving that service. Yarn, you can buy it online, sure, but can you touch it? Can you understand what it's going to look like? Because a lot of yarn shops will have samples made of that yarn. Well, you can see how it's knitted up. You can't see that online, or if you do, you're just seeing an image of it, and it really doesn't give you the perspective. So I've always said, go to the local yarn shop and experience it for yourself.
Well, that's so true. And of course, it's hard to knit so many models, but that's part of the enjoyment for me is somebody will come in and say what they have in mind, and they don't really know, and so it's a pulling out process. And well, what do you like? What colors? And we just help pull it out of them, and then to see that they've created it and enjoy it. That's the fun for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really nice. Not to be selfish, because they are getting something they like, but so am I. But and the service part is good. Never ever let anyone intimidate you when you go into a yarn shop. No one fell out of the womb knowing how to knit or crochet. Somebody learned. And we're not going to get into the bad stories, but there are some of people that consider themselves master knitters or master crocheters. They may be really good, but maybe we will too someday.
Someday.
And that's what I liked most about this group that Charles had. Everyone was so helpful. You know, nobody said, man, he can run an adding machine, but he can't knit and purl. Just the help, and I know that you got enjoyment helping people, because, and I guess that's what you're doing here, is just trying to bring people along. There was an article that I read in the New York Times. I don't know the prison, but it was some maximum security prison with death row. Did you hear about that? Where they taught them how to knit? And I mean, these are some of the worst people that ever walked the earth, and they did like a 180. They were knitting for, I think, preemie babies and children with cancer.
Yeah, cancer stuff, yeah.
And I mean, for the first time in their life, they were doing something productive, and it was amazing, the result of it. And imagine what that can do for us when we've had a bad day and get our knitting needles out. Instead of sticking somebody with them, we just create a beautiful piece of fabric.
Yeah. Yeah, there was it used to be a podcast, a true Apple podcast, Audible, called Cognitive. And oh my God, I loved it. And it was she was a psychiatrist or psychologist, I don't know which. And she worked in a prison. And she taught guys in the prison how to knit. And she told her story about how to do that. She's since stopped. I doubt she's going to ever see this, but if she ever did, you don't know what you did to me, because I was like, to be able to share that with people like what you just described, people who have no hope, no joy, and you can give them joy and you can give them hope just in creating something, that's amazing. It's magical. And so that's kind of, I don't know who's watching this. I don't know if anybody's going to watch this. If you're watching it, comment below, please.
Oh, they're going to be glued to the set. What are you talking about?
But if I can help somebody find a hobby that they like we like knitting, then, I know I've done, even if one person does it.
Well, and it happens today with us on a smaller level. There are groups that make prayer shawls. There are groups that make caps to send overseas. And then the stories come back, and you hear somebody that, had cancer and they needed this type of fiber and what have you, and they send a little prayer on a note card, and when the person passed, they were holding on to the prayer rug or the prayer shawl. It's a gift that you just can't buy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because the idea of a prayer shawl, I guess, and everything I do is sort of prayer shawl-y, of the concept anyway, because like when I made that baby romper that I showed you last time, every stitch I was thinking of her. Every stitch I was imagining her little feet and her little hands and how cute she was, and that love that goes into that piece, I'm telling you, it's felt. And that's the concept behind a prayer shawl, because as long as you're praying and thinking of those people as you create that shawl, that love is felt when they receive it. And there's plenty of people out there that'll tell you stories after stories. If you have a story about how knitting changed someone in your life or your life, share it with us. Comment below and let us know, because I think everybody needs to know and hear stories like that. So let's talk about some of the stuff that you've knit.
Well, and again, it started in Charles' group. It started out as a men's group, but we let a few women come in because they said their groups were so boring. And
that's what we called it. Back then we called it gents and pearls, like guys and girls. And we had two core women, because I still talk to Amanda.
Yeah.
And then I know Elizabeth's been she graduated, I think, and so she's been doing some fun stuff. But anyway, We did let a couple women in, but they were like guys. I mean, they were.
Well, and we were all young and cute back then, so they were all jockeying for our attention. But one of them, I remember, Eric, the redneck knitter, was sharing a pattern.
That's
with
what he calls Eric Lucius. Who
He
you met
calls
a couple-
himself that.
He does, but I don't think we mentioned that on his interview. But
Great guy, but he was a color work knitter, ferrule knitter, and he had all these patterns, and I thought, well, I guess I could try that. How bad can it be? I found an answer to that too, but I was knitting a bumblebee. It was a cap with a bumblebee repeat around it, and one of the women, notice I didn't say lady, one of the women in the group came up and said, well, what's that? And I said, well, it's a bumblebee. And she said, well, it's pulled so tight it looks like a gnat. So that's my Ravelry name now, the Gnat Knitter. But for those of you that don't know what color work is, it's when you carry two yarns together, or one is working and one is laying back, and you create designs.
look at that.
And the trick is to keep your tension even. Otherwise, it will pull. The yarn in the back will pull, which is how my bumblebee became a gnat.
That was a very important lesson for you.
It is very important. Something else that I enjoy is having a yarn shop. I'm surrounded, obviously, by yarn, and I'm constantly thinking of ways to put things together, and just to encourage people, if they bring a book in and see a pattern and they want that yarn, and it's like, well, that book's 10 years old, we can't get that yarn anymore. Well, then why do they have the book? Like, well, it's a guide, and
Right.
well, how can you do that? It's like, okay, this is a pretty blue. Let's go find a blue that you like. And they say, you can do that? And it's like, yes, you can do whatever you want.
Right.
And if it doesn't work, so what? Case in point, this is a beautiful yarn that I have, that I've had for a while, and I didn't know what to do with it. It's actually 3 yarns
Oh,
put
wow.
together. And I don't like the way this looks. It's just the texture of it's not right.
It's like it's almost like it's crocheted. You know that feeling of like a crocheted fabric because it's thicker.
And we can get into that in a minute, but my point is, yeah, I've put all this in here, but this yarn will be beautiful woven on a loom, or a simpler pattern, because this is this has got a lot of texture to it, and this yarn has a lot of texture. So the pattern, it was all wrong. I made a mistake.
Well, yeah, and part of that, and in the baby romper I did, in the chest area, there's a cable pattern, but because the yarn is so variegated, you really can't see it. Same with that. A variegated yarn, a multicolored yarn, just doesn't look good when it's textured pattern. It looks good in much simpler tones, or if you separate it and do it like that.
I also like to experiment. There's a pattern that I love. It's a shawl, a triangular shawl called the Age of Brass and Steam. It's a free pattern, and it's designed with, I guess it's a DK weight yarn, one color yarn, and it makes a really pretty shawl.
Okay.
So I had a ball of Feza yarn where it's just all these crazy yarns that are put together, 3 yarns together, and then in 9 yards it'll switch to something else. So it's this big ball of just like all this yarn. And I thought, how would that look in an Age of Brass and Steam? So I had to go from a size 6 needle to a 19.
Oh my gosh.
And it made this crazy looking thing that's beautiful. And the question, well, how can you do that? You just do it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, you take it out and do something else. So this is an example. The Age of Brass and Steam again, I'm using a set with
neat.
5 different colors, and I just thought people would want to see what you can do with those 5 different colors. So I just modified and just started changing the colors, and I think this one's going to work out.
That looks really nice. That's going to look really great.
And
I'm not familiar with that pattern, so
it's manly colors.
It is. They are. And
Although
that's important.
I'm now switching to pink. It's actually mauve.
It's mauve, yeah.
But the sky's the limit. That's the great thing about this hobby is, if you have a pattern, you can follow the pattern, but you can also go off on tangents and do creative things.
Yeah, and we haven't gotten into, I haven't restarted the knitting clinic just yet, but when we do, we're going to talk heavily about making a swatch. You know, I always say, buy one more ball of yarn, buy one more skein of yarn than you think you need for the project. And it's not to increase his sales or the sales of anywhere, but you may not get that yarn's dye lot again. And you always want to make sure that if you run out, if you invariably you get to the end of that ball and you're like, I need
The worst feeling in the world.
3 more yards, you know, or something really small. Well, if you had that extra ball, you'd be there. Additionally, like a lot of times I'll make something and I'm like, I want to change it. Well, one of the easiest way to change something is to make a border on it. Put a border on it. Well, if you want to use the same yarn, if you've bought an extra ball, you have enough to do a border.
Well, it's really important because if you want to put your project in timeout and just start something else, for those of us that do 2, 3, 10, 12 things at a time.
I don't know anybody like that.
And then you come back to it, maybe they don't make the yarn anymore.
Right.
Even if you could find it in a different dye lot.
Yeah, because I told them that on my during one of my early Man vs. Knitting things, I was going to say I'm going to commit to fixing all my completing all my whips, all my works in progress. Remember, I haven't forgot. But part of that was I didn't want to focus too much on that because a lot of the yarns you can't get anymore. In the case of the buffalo wool from that mitten that I showed you, his company officially doesn't sell yarn anymore. So, you know, Stunning String Studios does it now. So, yeah, it's one of those things that's kind of funny that you don't want to focus too much on the past because things change. But learning how to substitute. There used to be a great website called Yarndex. It's no longer in existence, or I would have shown you that on the website section on the very first, because it was the best at learning how to substitute yarns. You could put in a yarn and it would give you every other one. But I do know of another site that does it, and so we'll be talking about that very soon, because substituting yarn for a pattern is a big deal, especially when you're looking at old books or periodicals or even online, because you look at the year, sometimes you don't even know the year the pattern was made that you're looking at, and so it could be the yarn's no longer available.
Well, and that can also lead to creativity in that if you need a certain gauge yarn and you have another yarn that you really like but it's not quite to that gauge, then put two together that'll bring it up to that gauge. And I'm surprised at the number of people that say, I didn't know you could do that. It's like, well, who told you couldn't do that?
Right.
And you can sometimes get really beautiful textures and beautiful color combinations doing that.
Yeah, no, it can really, and especially if you are a boring knitter, you know, or somebody that, not a boring knitter, but I mean somebody
You
who
knit
just,
boring projects.
you knit boring projects and you want to liven them up. Get 2 yarns, hold them together, knit that, and see if it doesn't liven your project.
Completely change the look of it.
Totally change it.
You can do, you know, a case in point of what you're talking about is Collinette. It's a company that produced yarn for a while, available only in Europe. They brought it here. It was wildly successful, evidently not enough that they could keep it here, but now we can't get it anymore. And a friend of ours, true story, was knitting in the doctor's office, and this lady commented on her project and said it was really beautiful yarn, and she said, it's Collinette, it's from Wales. And the lady went, oh. And about 15 seconds later, she said, what part of the whale does that come from? And she said, I didn't know how to answer. And I said, you should have told her right here under the chin. There's a little bit of scruff. But so we have their yarns,
sorry, that was funny.
and we have a few skeins left. And if it's not enough for somebody to do a project, well, here, combine it with this. And as long as gauge is important, I think when you're doing garments, it's very important. But if you're doing a shawl, a scarf, you know, it doesn't matter if it's 1/4 of an inch. The
Right.
total project is, so you have that freedom to substitute yarns.
Yeah, we knew somebody in our group at one time had made socks, but they were huge. I
Leg
mean, like
warmers?
enormous. Yeah, they were just enormous, and we told them to felt them, and so they felted them, and then they were the right size, and they were like perfect. So, of course, that's not a perfect science. They got very lucky.
And then felt it again, and they give it to their dog.
But yeah, no, you can do a lot of things to fix knitting. You can do a lot of things to make your knitting creative and fun. And all of that can be made possible at your local yarn shop.
Please. The internet is a great place, but you got to touch the yarn. You've got to feel it, because of colors, of course, are never. That's the hardest part, I think, is matching colors and putting two skeins together side by side. You know, even in front of you, sometimes can be difficult when you unwind them and see how they all go together. But absolutely, we're here for you. We're here to help.
Yeah. So if you are in the Texas area, go to LaGrange, see his shop. See, it's one of the better shops in the state. And if you get to there, you'll go up and you can see Yarnorama too, and visit Susan. Love that shop. Love her. So yeah, there's a lot of great stuff here in Texas, and that's partly why I'm showing mostly Texas shops, guys, things, because we've got a lot here.
It's a great, great, great hobby. We need to further it. So thank you for doing this.
Thanks. It's been fun. As long as we can get more guys to do it, because more guys walking into a shop, you know, because somebody on this last yarn crawl said, you know, do you really think that more guys walking into a shop is going to do something? I'm like, okay, say your yarn rep walked into your shop and there were 2 or 3 guys in there looking at yarn. Do you think they're going to be pushing all that novelty frilly stuff, or are they going to be like, hey, you know what, there's some colors that work for, you know, this market? Because that's what I have the hardest time finding is, and that's when I try to feature yarn dyers who give us more quality men's color yarns. Like
Well, and you
referenced.
never know how it'll come. Another customer that's become a very good friend of mine, his wife came in for one of our classes. He's a hunter and a rancher and all those things, and she was home knitting, and he kept looking over at her and said, man, you're slow at that. And she was like, you think you can do better? And he was in the store the next day and said, teach me how to knit. And so I did, and he now is knitting for their grandkid. He's made his wife scarves. She's put it away, and he's picked it up.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he's very good.
That's awesome.
Isn't that great?
That's a good story. Wow. Yeah, see, I'm telling you, I mean, half the hurdle is just getting to the point where you do it.
Well, and if anyone had told him he would be knitting, if he even knew what that word meant,
right,
it's
he would have said no.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
and now he loves it.
it's a good hobby.
Tomorrow he's closing on a home in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and wants to know, where am I going to be able to buy yarn in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico? I'm like, well, have to quilt this K and put it in your suitcase and take it down.
Yeah, that I've looked, because we've been down there for a little while, gone down for a few years, and yeah, there's really not.
Well, I mean, with that the temperature down there, obviously you don't want wools, but it does get a little chilly in the fall.
Yeah.
But interesting fact, I've been all over the world with my previous job knitting. It's a great time to knit on an 18-hour flight to Dubai. Never had a problem with the knitting needles, but today, coming out of Mexico, you cannot take needles out of Mexico.
Really?
They will not let you, and I've seen them.
So you can fly there with them, but you
fly.
can't take them out.
So maybe you'll edit this out, or maybe you won't, but I found a trick. You take your backpack and the little places where you put your writing instruments, just get 2 metal writing pens and unscrew your interchangeable tips and put them behind the writing pens, and they don't find them. So interchangeable needles the way to go, because it not only saves you money,
yep,
but you can get them out of Mexico.
I'm going to use that.
No, I mean, why not? You do all that work.
I might use that font, because I've had TSA even here in the States. Not every TSA agent is trained the same, and not every one of them has the same supervisor. There's a whole lot of reasons and things that go into it, and I love what they do, and you know, God help them for what they do. But some of them have been really stickly when I've flown with needles.
Well, one of my employees, and I should ask her where
And I always
it
use
is.
interchangeables.
She has laminated evidently the rules from TSA, and evidently there's something now that says you can bring knitting needles
Yeah.
on a plane. And so she just shows it to the TSA agent, and they're
I
like,
carry
"Oh, okay."
it, and I have it printed inside my bag.
And they still give you.
And I can show it to them, and they still give me, because they don't know that I've made it up.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, no, and they're not going to take the time to read their own stuff. So yeah, no, it's been a challenge flying, and that's why I typically fly with plastic too. I don't like knitting with plastic needles, but when I fly with Addy Clicks, no way, because they're metal.
Mm-hmm.
Even the carbons that have like just metal, there's like plated tips. They're not truly metal, but they still look metally, and I've had problems with those. So I fly with either bamboo or plastic.
You must look just dangerous, because mine are Chai-Gu metal, and that's all I'll use. And I've yet to have a problem,
Oh,
except
wow.
Mexico. But
Wow.
I fixed them.
You sure did. Of course, if you're flying with if you take a size 10 needle, you're gonna have to really have a really fat pin
That's true.
to get that in there. I don't know. We'll have to look at pen blanks. If you know, yeah, because there's I went to a yarn shop. It was the last one I went to. You're So Crafty
Mm-hmm. Seguin.
in Seguin, and it's a really neat. If you don't know or what they do, visit the Facebook page. It was the last shop I went to. It was stop number 16 on the yarn crawl, but they had a dyer there, so they have an alpaca ranch, and the husband turns the beautiful wood and makes combination seam rippers, and then it's interchangeable. You flip it out and turn it around, and it's a crochet hook.
Huh.
And I was like, that's clever. And so I thought that'd be neat. But if he could make a pen blank for a size 10 needle.
Yeah, you wouldn't really be cheating, because although the seam ripper might get you in trouble.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't do a seam ripper. I just want the blank.
Okay.
Just something to hide my needles so I could fly. Yeah, because I would just put a stitch holder on there and
Now we're going to get in trouble with TSA.
sue me. I don't care. I want to take knitting on my vacations. I have so much fun knitting. Like we went to Puerto Vallarta, and we're gonna have a beach day. Go out to the beach, and I have my bag, and I took my knitting. Well, I made sure it was linen, because the sand will get out of linen easier than it would with wool, and I happen to have a linen project, so I took it down there, and I'm sitting there on the beach, and everybody's like, "You're knitting." I'm like, it relaxes me, and I'm like loving it. And I'm like, I have this gorgeous yarn. I'm looking at this gorgeous beach with that gorgeous water. What's wrong with this picture? Nothing. Leave me alone.
No, I've seen knitters and I've seen needle pointers as well.
Yeah.
Why not?
There's a needle pointer in our new men's group.
I got a canvas for him to finish.
Okay.
I did maybe a square centimeter out of it. I'm like, who's got time for this when you're knitting?
Knitting can go very fast compared to that. But he does beautiful work. And so when you come one day, you'll see. We're trying to get more guys to come, because it's all about the fellowship. It's about the camaraderie and being able to support each other and show each other. And I've always complained that, Houston's so big, and yet, even in our group, we had the most, 17 guys?
No, it's
20
amazing.
guys?
It's even more amazing that Houston can't keep a knit shop open.
Yeah.
But that's another topic for another day.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It's not any fault of the knitters who are here. I'm just going to say that.
True.
All right. Well, on that note, Stephen, it's been great having you here.
My friend, thanks for taking the time.
It's been a pleasure, and be sure to go to his website at the very least, because they can order online, can't they?
Well, I'll close with that. I put in a website with e-commerce, and our entire success is based on service. It's a little bitty town. It's very difficult to get employees. And today when we order something, we want it in the mail tomorrow. We want it in our house tomorrow. And I'm not sure that we could do that, so I've chosen not to be online.
Okay.
However, we ship all over the world. We have a lot of yarn, as you mentioned, fabric as well, and we ship all over the world. So if there's something that you need, please, we can send it to you. And we also track, we have a customer database where we know what you've bought. And instead of calling and saying, I bought some blue yarn 2.5 years ago, do you have any more of that? Well, I can now look up and see what your blue yarn was and see if we have it.
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, we'd love to have you come by. Look forward to meeting you.
There you go. All right. Well, I want to thank him, and we'll see you back in the studio.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Wasn't he great? Oh my gosh. Really great. And like I said, this was done several weeks ago, henceforth this, which I'll explain later in the My Story section. But at any rate, I hope you enjoyed that. And we will move on to our next section, which is website.